The house wasn't on any map. No address number, no mailbox. Just a narrow gravel path, a steep hill, and warm yellow light bleeding through the windows like a secret someone forgot to hide. Carl killed the engine. No one spoke. Vince was already holding his phone, staring at the blinking blue dot on the tracker. "She's still inside," he muttered. "Been here 36 minutes. I opened the door of the van, my boots hitting the gravel like they didn't want to. The air smelled like lilacs and smoke. Somewhere far off, someone laughed. We hadn't planned to get this far. It started as a dumb suspicion, then a theory, then a bet. Now it was real. Too real. Our wives, Janessa, Ruthie, and Tilda, had told the same story, word for word, like they'd rehearsed it. Girls' night. Spa first, then drinks. Don't wait up. But none of us were dumb enough to ignore the way they'd said it. Tilda had worn earrings she hadn't touched since their honeymoon. Ruthie shaved her legs in the morning. And Janessa? Janessa left the house in a coat she'd never worn for me. And now, here we were, staring at a glowing house in the middle of nowhere. Uninvited. Undecided. I was the one who stepped forward first. We didn't knock. The door wasn't locked. It opened with a soft creak, as if it expected us. Inside, everything was warm. Cushioned chairs. A chandelier flickering above a curved staircase. Quiet jazz bleeding through invisible speakers. 3 wine glasses half full on the console table near the wall. A shoe rack sat by the entryway. 3 pairs of heels. None of them belonged to Janessa. Vince whispered, "So, where the hell are they?" That's when we heard it. Laughter. Not from the living room. Not from upstairs. It was coming from below. Basement. We followed the sound down the narrow carpeted stairs, hearts thudding. I could barely breathe. My head filled with static. The moment I saw what was at the bottom, I swear, I forgot how to blink. Because there they were. Our wives. But not as we knew them. And the things they were doing. There's something surreal about descending into a space that was never meant for you. Every creak of the steps felt like it echoed off the bones of the house. The deeper we went, the more the air thickened. The laughter grew louder, but so did something else, a strange rhythm, like soft thuds in sync with dim, pulsing lights below. We had no plan. No excuse. Just 3 exhausted, confused husbands chasing the invisible thread of betrayal. The last step opened into what could only be described as a remodeled basement-turned-lounge. Velvet couches. Gold accents. Spotlights dimmed low enough to soften intentions but bright enough to reveal truth. There were people, a dozen, maybe more. But not in pairs, not seated around food or drinks. They moved, intertwined like something choreographed yet chaotic. Men and women together. Women we recognized. I spotted Ruthie first. Carl's wife. She was on one of the couches, her legs crossed over a man in a silk shirt, not her husband. She was laughing in that high, delighted way she used to when Carl brought home takeout and flowers on her birthday. Only this laugh wasn't meant for Carl. Vince froze as he spotted Tilda, his wife, dancing slowly with another man in the corner, her hands on his chest, her eyes locked in something dangerously close to devotion. She didn't even look tipsy. She looked alive, like she belonged there. And then my eyes found Janessa. She wasn't dancing. She was sitting on the bar stool, back arched slightly, fingers playing with the rim of a wine glass as a man whispered something into her ear. She smiled, no guilt, no hesitation, and reached out to touch his face. I don't know why that broke me more than anything else, but it did. I think because I'd spent years trying to earn that exact smile. And now she was giving it away like it meant nothing. I couldn't speak. My knees buckled and I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breath. Vince whispered something sharp under his breath and took a step forward, but I stopped him. We weren't ready to be seen yet. We needed to know more. We needed to understand. That's when the man next to Janessa said something that made my stomach twist into a knot. "Your husband still thinks you're at that fake wine bar?" She giggled. "He thinks I'm with Brittany and the girls. He offered to pick me up later. Isn't that adorable?" The man laughed. So naive. But hey, ignorance makes them loyal. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a slip-up or a spur-of-the-moment betrayal. It was organized, intentional, routine, and we had been the joke. The background characters in our wives' real lives. I looked at Carl. He looked sick. Vince had sat down on the last step, face buried in his hands, muttering something over and over. I couldn't hear it. There were photos on the wall. Of past parties. Different outfits. Same location. Different men. And in nearly every one, Janessa was smiling. Not one picture included me. Not one moment of our marriage had ever looked like this. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I wasn't ready. So we backed away. Slowly. Silently. We climbed those stairs one at a time like ghosts fleeing the scene of their own deaths. And when we stepped outside, the cool air hit us like a slap. But none of us spoke until we got back in the van. Carl broke the silence. We can't just go back home like nothing happened. Vince whispered. She packed a toothbrush. I saw it in her bag. And me? I stared out the window, gripping my seat so tightly my fingers went numb. Because now I wasn't wondering if she loved me anymore. I was wondering if she ever did at all. We didn't speak much on the drive back. Vince was staring straight ahead like the road owed him an explanation. Carl kept tapping his leg against the floor of the van like he was trying to shake something loose inside him. I sat in the back seat, chewing the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. The silence wasn't comfortable. It was heavy, thick with shame, anger, confusion. We weren't just husbands anymore. We were witnesses. Witnesses to something we hadn't been prepared to see. Carl was the first to say it out loud. So what the hell do we do now? No one answered right away. What could we say? I didn't want to go home, but I didn't want to be anywhere else either. The house that Janessa and I had spent years building, painting walls, installing shelves, folding towels side by side, suddenly felt like a stage set. A lie made of drywall and matching curtains. Everything I thought was ours now felt like a prop in someone else's story. When I finally walked through the front door, the silence hit me like a warning. Janessa wasn't home yet. I checked the clock, 11:52 p.m. She had said she might be late, but it was clear now that she never planned to return by midnight. I stood in the living room for a while, just staring at the couch, then at the empty wine glass on the table, then at the framed photo of us in front of Mount Rainier, back when smiles didn't feel rehearsed. I don't know what made me go to the closet. Maybe I wanted to see if her toothbrush was really missing. Maybe I was looking for signs. I honestly don't remember. But what I found wasn't just a sign. It was a history. Behind her coats, tucked in a box I'd never noticed before, were two small photo albums. One was covered in faux leather and had her initials engraved. I opened it and instantly regretted it, but I couldn't stop. The first few pictures seemed harmless enough. Parties I wasn't invited to, vacations I'd never heard about. Then the photos shifted. Janessa with people I didn't recognize. Her face closer to theirs than it had ever been to mine. Poses that suggested more than just friendship. Some were in hotel rooms. Others in backyards I'd never seen. And then there were the letters. Dozens of folded notes and printed emails. Messages that started out professional, work-related, and turned into something else. Nicknames. Inside jokes. Explicit details. Promises. One of them said, "When he's away at that conference, you're mine again." She had printed them. She had saved them. And she had hidden them in plain sight. I sat on the floor for an hour, knees to my chest, heart pounding so loud I thought I might actually go deaf from it. I wanted to cry, but the tears didn't come. Instead, I felt hollow. Like my body had chosen to go on autopilot while my mind floated above, watching a stranger in my own house discover how disposable he really was. Just after 1 a.m., I heard the front door. Her keys jingled like wind chimes, casual, unbothered. She walked in smelling like perfume and wine and something I couldn't name but instinctively hated. "Hey," she said, as if nothing was wrong. "You're still up?" I didn't answer. I stood there holding one of the photos, the one of her in a hotel bed with someone who wasn't me, and I watched her face change. First confusion, then fear, then something close to calculation. She didn't cry. She didn't deny. She just walked past me and said, "Let me explain, Wade." But she had no idea what I'd already seen, what I'd already heard, what was already unraveling inside of me. I followed her down the hall, but not to talk, not to listen. I just needed to see what else she thought she could still hide. The hallway felt endless as I followed Janessa toward our bedroom. She walked ahead like nothing about our lives had cracked, like the air wasn't thick with betrayal, and every step wasn't sinking me deeper into a life I no longer recognized. The photo was still in my hand. My knuckles were white around its edges. I watched her back as she pulled her hair into a loose bun, the way she always did before bedtime, like her biggest worry was what pajamas to wear. That calmness, that detachment, was worse than any confession. She sat on the edge of the bed, glanced up, and patted the mattress beside her like we were going to have a casual chat about something forgettable. I didn't sit. "Who is he?" I asked. My voice came out smaller than I'd planned, barely more than a whisper. But it filled the room. She didn't answer at first. Her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her dress, smoothing wrinkles that didn't exist. Then she shrugged. That was a long time ago. My jaw clenched so hard I thought I'd crack a tooth. There are dates on the photos, Janessa. 2 months ago. 3 weeks ago. Don't insult me. She sighed, stood up, and finally looked me in the eyes. Wade, you've been distracted for a while. Distant. I didn't want things to go this way. That was the moment I realized how far apart we drifted and how far she'd run without me even noticing. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even panicked. Her tone was calm, rehearsed, like she'd written this script 100 times in her head and was finally getting to perform it. I tried. Okay, she continued. I tried to stay, but we've just been off. My hands were trembling. I opened the second photo album, the one I hadn't looked through yet, and held up the picture of her wearing the black dress I had bought for our anniversary dinner last year. Only, she wasn't with me in the photo. She was with him, sitting on a rooftop patio, champagne in hand, his arm draped around her like he'd always belonged there. That dress? I said, my voice shaking. You said you ruined it in the wash. You said you tossed it. She said nothing. Not even a flinch. You wore it for him, didn't you? Still nothing. My stomach twisted into a knot. I wasn't even sure if I was angry anymore. I just felt empty. Discarded. Like all the years I spent loving her had been boxed up and shipped off without a return address. I gave up so much for us, I said. I turned down that job in Denver because you didn't want to move. I skipped the fishing trip with my dad because your sister needed help moving. I traded everything to build this life with you. She looked away. I never asked you to do those things. That hit harder than anything else she could have said. Not because it wasn't true, but because it was. I had volunteered everything, and now she was treating it like I'd simply made poor investments she never approved. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw the photos or punch a wall or demand answers. I just sat down, opened the drawer on my nightstand, and pulled out the envelope I'd prepared earlier that day, the one I never thought I'd actually need. Inside was a printed document I typed up the night we followed them to that house. I slid it across the bed to her. What's this? She asked. Read it. She opened the envelope. Her eyes scanned the first few lines. Her face changed for the first time, just slightly. Her brow twitched. Her jaw tightened. It was the draft of a separation agreement. Nothing final. Nothing legal. Just my line in the sand. Is this a threat? She asked quietly. No, I said. It's a mirror. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. She folded the paper neatly, placed it on the nightstand, and said, You know this isn't just about me, right? You haven't exactly been present, Wade. You live in your own head. I nodded. And you lived in someone else's arms. We didn't say anything after that for a while. The clock ticked. A car drove by. Somewhere in the house, the refrigerator kicked on with a low hum. It felt absurd that the world hadn't stopped spinning. She eventually laid back on the bed, turned her back to me like we were just having another silent night. Like this was normal. Like nothing had just ruptured beyond repair. And I realized, in that moment, that no matter what I did next, nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't sleep. I stayed on the edge of the bed until the sun came up, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun endlessly above a life I didn't recognize anymore. I didn't move from that bed until the sky turned gray and the light behind the curtains shifted into morning. Janessa was still asleep next to me, breathing soft and even, like she hadn't destroyed something fundamental between us. Like she hadn't taken a sledgehammer to the trust one had carefully stacked across 9 long years. I stared at the back of her head and realized I didn't even know this person. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. I got up, quietly, like a stranger in my own home. The hallway felt different. Every photo on the wall mocked me. The framed shot of us at her cousin's wedding, her leaning into me like she couldn't imagine life anywhere else. The one at that pumpkin patch 2 Octobers ago, the one where she convinced me to wear that ridiculous flannel shirt. I remembered how we laughed that day. I didn't realize I was the only one laughing honestly. Downstairs, I made coffee with shaking hands. Not because I was cold, but because I felt unmoored, like I was floating above myself. I didn't know what to do, where to begin. And that's when her phone buzzed on the kitchen island. I shouldn't have picked it up. I know that. But I did. The screen lit up with a name I recognized, Shelley Clinking Glasses. Her coworker. The one who always made fun of me for being too polite or too vanilla. The text read, So? Did he find out? Or are you still playing dumb? Face with tears of joy. That emoji, that laughing face, it hit harder than anything. Not because it was mocking, but because it confirmed everything. This wasn't just Janessa's lie. This was entertainment. A group project? A running joke. And I was the fool center stage with no clue. I opened the message thread, and what I saw didn't just break me, it erased me. For months, they had a group chat. Janessa, Shelley, a woman named Darla. Even someone listed as T, who, I'd later find out, was one of the men from the party we'd seen that night. They had code names for their little outings. They rated their husband's obliviousness. They even had screenshots of texts we'd sent, Vince's sweet goodnight message, Carl's reminder about their anniversary dinner, followed by laughing emojis and gifs of eye rolls. I couldn't breathe. One message from Janessa, just 2 weeks ago, read, "I swear, he still thinks I'm the same girl from college. Poor guy wouldn't survive a single night in this circle." That did it. I locked her phone. I didn't throw it or smash it or scream. I just set it down, walked out into the driveway, sat in my car, and stared at the steering wheel for 20 minutes. Then I texted Vince and Carl. They all knew. It's not just your wives. It's a whole thing. We need to talk. Now. I didn't wait for a reply. I drove to Carl's place. He was already outside when I pulled up, disheveled, sunken-eyed, like he hadn't slept either. Vince arrived 15 minutes later, and when we sat down in Carl's garage, no one said a word for a full minute. Then I handed them printed screenshots. I had emailed the whole thread to myself before leaving. Vince read silently, then passed it over. Carl didn't even finish reading before he stood up and started pacing. He kept muttering, "She lied to my face." She lied and smiled and touched my hand while doing it. It wasn't just that they had cheated. It was the smugness, the teamwork, the absolute ease with which they wove it into daily life. Our marriages weren't cracked. They were staged. "We have to tell them we know," Carl said eventually. "We can't keep pretending." "No," I said. "We can't do it like that." That's what they'd expect. Some teary confrontation, some dramatic exit. They'll spin it, cry, blame us, make us feel like we caused this. Vince raised an eyebrow. "So what do we do?" I took a deep breath. "We ended on our terms. Quietly. Precisely. And we make sure they can't talk their way out of it." They looked at me like I'd grown another head. Carl blinked. "Wade, are you saying we set a trap?" I nodded. "No more guessing. No more waiting. If they're going to act like this is a game, fine. Let's end it like one. But we're the ones holding the cards now." What came next wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. If Janessa could live a double life right under my nose, then I could unravel hers without her noticing, one piece at a time. The decision to stay silent was harder than I thought. Every word Janessa spoke to me after that night sounded like static. I'd nod, smile, even chuckle when she made one of her predictable little jokes over dinner. But inside I was dissecting everything, the way she moved through the house, how often she checked her phone, which outfits she wore and when. It wasn't just about collecting evidence anymore. It was about controlling the moment of impact. Carl, Vince, and I created a shared folder. We titled it something mundane, Q2 Documents, just in case anyone stumbled across it. In it, we dumped screenshots, video clips, receipts, saved voicemail recordings, calendar logs, and photos. We had timestamps, voice messages. One clip even showed Janessa in a parking garage at 11:24 p.m. climbing into the back of a silver car with T, the man from the basement party. She looked over her shoulder. She smiled. And then the door closed. Vince had started quietly pulling money out of their joint account and setting it aside in a private bank. Carl installed a hidden camera in his guest room because Ruthie had started using it for work calls during the day. A week later, we had footage of her on a video chat in lingerie, blowing kisses to someone named M and saying, "He still thinks I'm just exhausted after work." As for me, I didn't go through Janessa's things anymore. I didn't need to. I had enough to bury the fantasy I used to call marriage. What I needed now was timing. Then came the invite. Shelley, the ringleader, apparently, was throwing another networking party. The same house. Same address. Saturday night. Janessa was glowing when she told me she even kissed me on the cheek, which she hadn't done in weeks. "It's nothing big," she said. "Just a few of us girls and maybe some friends from work. You know. Wine, playlists, gossip." I played dumb. Smiled. "Sounds like fun. Will you be staying the night?" She blinked. "I might. Depends on how late it goes." I said, "That's fine. Just text me if you do." She didn't text me that night. And she didn't know I was less than 100 feet away. We parked down the road again. Same van. But this time, we brought equipment. Vince had set up wireless mics and connected them to a laptop, recording everything from a nearby car. Carl had a handheld camcorder with infrared. I brought a hard drive, batteries, cables, even backup phones. We weren't just recording for ourselves anymore. We were preparing for distribution. And we weren't alone. We'd reached out to 2 other men, former partners of women in the same circle. They didn't need convincing. One of them, Alan, had already been divorced for 6 months. His ex had been part of the same parties and the same messages. He had kept quiet out of embarrassment until now. The other, Tom, had found photos and voice notes just like ours but had no idea who to talk to. When we showed him what we had, he cried. Right there. Cried and then said, "Let me help." So now there were 5 of us. At 11:08 p.m., we watched Janessa arrive in the same dress from one of the photos. The same one she wore on our 3rd anniversary. My stomach twisted, but I didn't let it break me this time. I just stared. Cold. Focused. Inside the house, through the windows, we saw the dancing. The toasts. The private touches. These weren't women trying to escape bad marriages. These were women thriving off deception. Manipulating it. Feeding on it. At 1:42 a.m., we launched Phase 1. Alan sent a scheduled group message, carefully constructed, screenshot included, to every woman at that party. The message contained a fake link to new photos from last weekend and instructions to click immediately. The link redirected to a private, locked page labeled with nothing more than, "We know everything." The panic began within minutes. We saw them freeze. One by one, faces changed. Phones lit up. Some women left the room. Some grabbed their things. One screamed. Janessa stood completely still for a full 20 seconds, staring at her screen like it had sucked the oxygen out of her lungs. They tried calling. Messaging. One even went outside looking around, trying to spot someone. But we were shadows. We were done being seen. And then we sent the final text. To each of our wives at the same time. We saw the heels. We heard the laughs. We stayed silent long enough. Goodbye. It was done. I powered down my phone, closed the laptop, and sat back in the van as the chaos unfolded behind us. Carl was shaking. Vince was dead quiet. No one smiled. There was no celebration. Because this wasn't revenge. It was survival. And we had finally stopped drowning in their silence. The morning after the party didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff you already jumped off, weightless, wind rushing past, but no sign yet of where you'll land. I sat alone in my car outside a storage unit I'd rented 2 weeks earlier under a false name. Inside it were the boxes I had packed in silence over the past few nights while Janessa slept, believing everything had gone back to normal. My clothes. My documents. The photo of my mom from her last birthday. The watch my dad gave me before he passed. Everything I wanted to take with me when I stopped pretending I had a home. At 8:13 a.m., my phone rang for the 7th time. Janessa. I let it buzz until it went silent. Again. And again. She'd already sent messages. Where are you? What is this? Wade, you're overreacting. The most recent one simply read, talk to me. Please. But she hadn't wanted to talk for months. Now that the silence wasn't hers to control, she panicked. I finally turned the phone off completely. Vince had driven 4 hours north during the night to stay with his brother. Carl, I later learned, had left a single note on Ruthie's dresser and boarded a plane to Phoenix with nothing but a carry-on and the clothes on his back. We didn't tell each other the details of our exits, not because we didn't trust each other, but because this wasn't a group effort anymore. We had supported each other through the collapse. Now we had to walk the aftermath alone. By mid-morning, Janessa showed up at the apartment I'd secretly rented the week before. I don't know how she found it. I'd been careful, separate lease, no shared documents, paid in cash. But she was resourceful when she needed to be. I heard her voice before I saw her. She was yelling through the crack in the door, her tone frantic, swinging between fury and pleading. Wade, you can't just vanish. We have a life. We have bills. You don't get to disappear because of one mistake. One mistake. I opened the door just far enough to see her eyes. She looked nothing like the confident woman from that basement lounge. Her mascara was smudged, her hair a mess, her breath uneven. But still, she didn't look sorry. She looked inconvenienced. She stepped forward to enter, but I blocked her with my body. You're not coming in. Her mouth opened, closed. You don't mean that. We need to talk. You ambushed me with that message. What was that? That, I said slowly, was your second life catching up to you. She tried to compose herself. You could have just asked. We could have worked through it. I tilted my head. You hid messages, printed love letters, were my gifts for other men, and your friends laughed behind my back while you played victim at home. What part of that says work through it to you? She blinked rapidly. I didn't know how to tell you. You didn't try. The silence between us stretched long and thin. She finally said, so what now? You just walk away? After everything? I didn't answer. I reached behind me, grabbed a sealed envelope from the small table by the door, and handed it to her. Inside were notarized documents. A full summary of what I knew, what I had, and what I was legally entitled to leave with. It also included a list of passwords I had wiped, my share of the joint savings transferred, and a signed statement withdrawing myself from the lease on the house, which, as I found out 2 days earlier, she had quietly refinanced without telling me. She tore open the envelope, I scanning the pages like she was reading a foreign language. Then she looked up. You really planned all this? I nodded. And you never once thought we could fix it? I met her gaze and said, you didn't think I'd find out. That's not something you fix. That's something you bury. And I won't be the one lying in the dirt. She didn't say anything after that. She just stepped back, looked down at the envelope in her hand, and turned away. I closed the door gently behind her. No slam. No drama. Just finality. That afternoon, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Alan, one of the men who had joined us that night. He said, 3 more came forward. 2 husbands. 1 fiancé. The circle was bigger than we thought. It's unraveling. I didn't respond right away. I just sat in the middle of that small apartment, surrounded by boxes and the hum of nothingness, and let the silence settle around me like a blanket I had earned. This wasn't closure. Not yet. But it was freedom. And for now, that was enough. 6 months later, I found myself sitting in a tiny coffee shop on the edge of a town I never thought I'd live in. The kind of place where people still wave when they cross the street and baristas remember your name without asking. I was sipping something too bitter, watching rain streak down the window, and I realized I hadn't thought about Janessa in days. Not in anger. Not in heartbreak. Not at all. I won't pretend it was easy getting here. The first few weeks after I left were brutal. There were nights I slept on an air mattress in a half-empty room and stared at the ceiling until dawn. I doubted everything, whether I'd overreacted, whether I should have fought harder, whether the pain would ever ease. But then the call stopped. The messages slowed. And one day, I woke up and didn't check my phone first thing. I made breakfast. I sat outside. I existed quietly, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like I was performing for anyone. Carl eventually sent a photo of himself grinning next to a desert canyon. He said he'd found work out west, something simple, no stress. Vince stayed with his brother for a while, then got his own place. He started painting again, something his wife had always told him was a waste of time. Now he sells pieces online under a pseudonym, and he swears he's never been happier. As for me, I went back to writing. Not anything big. Just small essays, private journals, thoughts I never used to allow myself to say out loud. I'd spent so long editing myself in that marriage, tiptoeing, apologizing, shrinking, that I'd forgotten how it felt to speak in my own voice. Finding it again was like discovering I'd been fluent in a language I was never allowed to use. Last week, I met someone. Her name's Laura. We crossed paths at the bookstore downtown, both reaching for the same novel. Classic, right? I was nervous. Awkward. Probably said something stupid. But she laughed, not the fake kind. Not the polite kind, the real kind. And it didn't feel like electricity or fate or any of those overused movie cliches. It just felt easy. We've had 3 coffee dates since. Nothing serious. No declarations. Just 2 people figuring out who they are, separately, together. And for the first time in what feels like forever, I'm not afraid of being known. I'm not defined by Janessa's choices anymore. I'm not the man she betrayed, or the fool at the party, or the name behind a legal document. I'm Wade. I survived. I didn't win back the past. I didn't need to. Because I built something better, a future where I never have to question my worth again. And that's the real ending.